In this worksheet called line chart, you can see that the line chart to the right is a little bit odd in a few respects. And as I click the line chart, you can see clearly that it's representing the data to the left. Rows 2, 3, and 4, Arizona, California, and Colorado data. And notice also within the data, we've got some empty cells. And there is a concern about how empty cells are being displayed. Now, interestingly enough, if we change this to a column chart, it's going to look a little bit different. I'm going to go to the Design tab. First of all, just change chart type. I'll make it a column chart, clustered column. We still see some gaps, but it looks a little bit different, maybe not as obtrusive as it might have with a line chart. But there are times when you want this to be a line chart. I'm going to press Control-Z to undo my last change to the column chart, back to a line chart. On the Design tab is a button called Select Data. This brings up a dialog box, and at first it's for fine-tuning or possibly adjusting each of these one by one in terms of the data being shown. But in the lower left-hand corner, you'll see a choice called Hidden and Empty Cells. Show empty cells as gaps. That's what we're seeing in this chart. Now, for example, if we look at Colorado here, we see this gray line. It comes to 2015 quarter 1, but we don't see any entry for 2015 quarter 2. And if you look at the data, over in row 4, cell G4 is empty, and therefore that's what we're seeing. So the data picks up for 2015 quarter 3. That's the value 18. We see this over here in the chart over here. The chart picks up the data, so to speak, or restarts here at the value 18 for quarter 3. That's because the default choice here, gaps, is in place. Now, because that cell is empty, do we want to make the conclusion that it's 0? Well, if we select 0 here, that's what's going to happen. I'll click OK. Watch the chart now. And we see how that goes to 0. Now, was that really the appropriate result? Well, it's a question of the content and who's in charge of the data and what does it really mean. I'm going to press Control-Z here to undo and then Control-Y to redo so we can compare the two again. Also, the blue line is changing also because its third entry is going to be a little bit different as we press Control-Z and Control-Y here to go back and forth a bit. So let's consider the other option here. Another way to get to that same choice is by right-clicking any line here, and we can go to Select Data right here. Lower left corner, Hidden and Empty Cells. Another point, Connect Data Points with Line. This is if we're going to interpolate the data and connect the 2 points around the missing point. So we're going to connect the 2 blue endpoints right here and the 2 gray points right here as if there were data there automatically. Connect Data Points with Line. And click OK. Watch the change that way. So there we're sort of guessing at the data. And that makes the lines look continuous and draws less attention to the chart. Now, when you connect the lines, the user doesn't necessarily see the data. And of course, we're seeing the data right now, but the chart could be located elsewhere. It could be overlapping the data. So if you wanted this to stand out a little bit, when you click a line, it selects the entire line. But if you pause, then click again, it selects only a particular segment, then double click, and you will have some options off to the right here. You want to choose the fill color bucket. And instead of a line width or a line color, possibly we'll change this color to bright orange here. We see what happens there. We could do that. We could do this with the gray line over here too. This portion of the line is interpolated. Click there to select the gray line. Double click, and we got the same choice off to the right. Instead of gray, we'll use that gold color. So we see 2 different examples here of bringing that out. That certainly isn't necessary, but it might be important sometimes to bring out the fact that those aren't real values. They're simply guesses as to what they would be if there were data there to connect those points. Now, there's another option related to all this too, and that's the whole idea of what happens when data is in hidden rows or hidden columns. The default setting in Excel is if the data is hidden, it doesn't show up in the chart. So what if in the data here we didn't want to show first and second quarters, we only wanted to compare third and fourth quarters? So I'm highlighting columns B and C, letting go of the left mouse button, holding down the Control key, highlighting columns F and G, right-click and hide. We're hiding our first and second quarter entries. Watch the chart. That's not so great, but at least the labeling tells us what we are seeing. Now, once again, I should probably bring out the fact that on the Design tab here, if we switch to a different chart type, and We'll go back to column again. The choices here, although we still see that there are gaps, look different, probably easier to read. But notice that we're not seeing the data in the hidden columns. Now, there could be times when you say, I do want to see the data in the hidden columns. So we can go back to our Select Data button on the Design tab. Lower left corner of this dialog box, Hidden and Empty Cells. The box, Show Data in Hidden Rows and Columns. Remember, the default is we do not see the data here. Now we're going to check the box. Click OK, and immediately we see the data in the background. So these choices here, hidden and empty cells, certainly have implications. They're not always used at the same time, of course, but we see examples here of how and why we want to sometimes show the data that's not visible. We want to deal with empty cells, how we want to deal with those, and it certainly will be different when we work with line charts and column charts. Once again, I'll switch back to a line chart. Chart data type here. Line. And once again, we see the differences here. So definitely worth exploring. And anytime you've got missing data, consider the possibilities of how these are likely to look in column charts and line charts. And remember those options, those capabilities of changing those missing entries by either filling them in or turning them into zeros or not showing them.